I don't have slides, but I just have 6 points. The first is every country is struggling through this pandemic and having to make hard trade-offs. There's no easy or simple solution or silver bullet answer. It's just what do you prioritize and what do you give up in that response. But we have learned the components of what does winning mean. And winning is not just about COVID deaths, it's about keeping your economy open, unemployment low, schools open, society running. And it seems there the three things that countries that have done that have managed to keep some balance among those is first, very clear messaging about COVID being serious and how to avoid getting it. The second is travel restrictions. No country has sustainably suppressed it without actually kind of protecting itself from reinfection from other parts of the world. And the third is test, trace, isolate, which is a strategy of almost, if you can imagine, a swimming pool and, just trying to kind of fish out anything that could be circulating that could infect others. And that's basically how test, trace, isolate works. But isolate has kind of been the Achilles heel of this because if people can't afford to isolate, they won't. And we've seen compliance is quite low because if people have to choose between staying home and not earning or going out and earning after they've been infected, they're going to go out and earn because they're already infected. So the second point is that strategies to just rely on health services capacity put you into reactive lockdowns because you are going to continually breach with this virus, given the hospitalization rates, even in young people in their 30s and 40s who might need oxygen, people in 40s and 50s who need ICU care. They may not die of it if they get care, but they still need hospital support. It's a losing game. And that's what modelers showed early on. You might have seen these waves. And basically the waves were, it goes up, it hits health services capacity, you put in place a lockdown to bring it down. Then of course the virus keeps spreading, it goes up, it hits that health services capacity, you put in a lockdown and it goes down. And the modelers have put this out for like 2 years. So if you can imagine right now, we've been a year into it. This is just the start and we can see how destructive that kind of pattern is. The third thing is that 2021 has become more complicated from a scientific perspective, as well as more possibilities because of what we see are variants. So variants have made the game even more challenging because these are mutations that occur as the virus circulates. And the more the virus circulates, it's a bit like a lottery. And at some point, this virus buys the winning ticket to become more severe and affect younger people. Or as we've seen in England, potentially kill people at a slightly higher rate. Or it becomes more transmissible, which we've seen. And that's one of the struggles now with the new variant is it's almost like there was a car driving and our restrictions are trying to keep ahead of it. And all of a sudden that car got faster because that variant is more transmissible. So our restrictions have to be even harsher. And of course, there's selective pressure. It's natural evolution that this pathogen, this virus wants to outsmart our bodies and ourselves by the one that is more advantageous at spreading that will occur. And the third is evading our vaccines and finding ways that even as we vaccinate or people get the virus naturally, that strains that seem to evade it, that means you could get reinfected with a substantially different version or you're vaccinated against one strain, there could be a new strain, are arising. And so this obviously complicates the picture enough as we were in terms of 2020 SARS-CoV-2 version 1, which seemed much simpler. So come to my fourth point, how do we get out of this? What's the end of the pandemic? Vaccines are our best way out. And right now it's actually really good news. I mean, this week we had Novavax, another vaccine coming out, Johnson & Johnson, which the UK has acquired 30 million doses for. That's one shot vaccine, Johnson & Johnson. We know we already have the Pfizer vaccine being rolled out. Moderna will start getting those doses in March. It's already being rolled out in the States, the AstraZeneca vaccine. So we actually are in a really good position because, there's lots of vaccines. There's also China has its own, Russia has its own, India has its own. So we're actually in a race between how fast can we vaccinate everyone versus how much will this virus try to mutate to escape that vaccine. It's a cat and mouse game. And but the thing to say in the short and the long term is in the short term for Scotland, we have a really good chance to vaccinate the bulk of the population, probably by autumn. And as we do that, you can think of lockdown as like a dial. We can start to increase the dial of activity as the numbers come down, as we saw last summer. And this is a bit like what the tier system tries to do. So we are in this nice position where the vaccine will continue to be rolled out into younger and younger populations, even kids potentially being vaccinated on the autumn. Vaccines are now being trialed in them. And we could reach 80 to 90% of the population being vaccinated because we have quite a small population versus other parts of the world. I mean, it's 5.5 million people versus, some cities in India, which have 23 million people, right? So we're in quite a good position here. But the worry is if we import a new strain, let's say from Brazil or from South Africa, which our vaccines aren't working against, we kind of start with a new virus. It's like going back to last February, because if we are susceptible to it, it doesn't matter if it's still SARS-CoV-2, it's a new virus to our bodies. And this is why I think the big strategic decision now is about travel restrictions and how do you put them in? Because places like New Zealand, Australia, but also Canada just announced yesterday, basically 14-day quarantines for anyone coming in hotels, managed quarantine. Israel has managed to vaccinate a large portion of their population. They have said stopped all international passenger traffic in or out. Norway has stopped it. Finland has stopped it. This is the strategic question here, which is once you've protected yourself, how do you kind of let domestic recovery occur? Hopefully by next autumn, we're back to like normal life, hugging, nightlife, live music, but you need to protect that. And the global strategy is to try to vaccinate across the world as quickly as we can. Because as long as the virus is circulating out in the Congo or in Haiti or Malawi, or now we're seeing Brazil, because it has such a large population, it has so many cases, new strains are going to arise. And the only way to stop that is kind of global vaccination. So there's a short-term view, which is the next 6 months for Scotland, and how do we get back to some semblance of life, but protected within our kind of bubble. And then longer term, how do we engage globally to make sure the poorest countries are not left behind? And I can say low-income countries until recently had gotten 25 vaccines, not 2,500, not 25,000, 25. And that was Russia giving 25 vaccines to Guinea. And that's going to become a problem because all we're going to see then is either we have to isolate ourselves and barricade ourselves off the way other islands have done and nations are thinking, or we have to somehow think more globally of how we reach those parts of the world. So I'll stop there. Hopefully kind of gives an idea where we are nationally and globally.